Many people are surprised when they hear this question for the first time. Are gravel gardens actually illegal in Germany? And if that's true, why are the same gravel gardens completely legal in the United States? The answer reveals something fascinating about how two countries think completely differently about private property, environmental responsibility, and what a garden is actually supposed to do. Germany does not have one single national law that says gravel gardens are illegal everywhere, but at the same time, in many parts of Germany, gravel-only gardens are restricted, discouraged, or effectively banned through local and state regulations. Meanwhile, in America, those same gardens are not only legal, but actively promoted in many regions. I'm Frank Miller, and this is Heritage Garden Wisdom, where we expose why the garden you're legally required to remove in Berlin is the exact same garden Arizona will pay you to install. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications, because understanding how governments regulate what you can grow on your own property reveals everything about environmental priorities versus property rights. Share this video with someone who thinks all regulations are the same everywhere. Comment below telling me which approach you think makes more sense, the German restriction or the American freedom. This isn't about politics, it's about two completely different philosophies of what gardens owe to the environment. In Germany, landscaping rules are often tied to environmental protection laws. Local governments care deeply about how private gardens affect biodiversity, soil health, temperature, and water absorption. Over the last decade, German authorities noticed a rapid increase in gravel-covered front yards, often built with plastic sheets underneath and only a few decorative plants on top. While these gardens look neat and modern, they create serious environmental problems that German law now actively prevents. Gravel gardens do not provide food or shelter for insects, birds, or pollinators. At a time when insect populations across Europe are declining catastrophically, this became a major regulatory concern. A yard covered in stone is essentially a dead surface. Nothing lives there, nothing feeds there, and nothing reproduces there. German environmental agencies began to see these gardens as part of a larger ecological crisis and responded with legal restrictions. There is also the problem of heat. Gravel and stone absorb and store heat during the day and release it slowly at night. In cities and residential neighborhoods, this creates heat islands that raise local temperatures during summer. As heat waves become more common and deadly in Europe, reducing heat buildup has become a legal and planning priority. Green gardens cool the air through evapotranspiration, but gravel gardens do the opposite, actively making urban areas hotter. German building codes now account for this thermal impact when evaluating landscaping plans. Another major issue is soil damage and water management. Most gravel gardens are built on top of plastic or fleece sheets that block the soil from breathing. Rainwater cannot soak naturally into the ground, soil organisms die, and groundwater recharge is reduced. During heavy rain, water runs off instead of soaking in, which increases pressure on drainage systems and raises flood risk. German building and environmental laws are designed to prevent exactly these problems. Because water management is treated as a collective responsibility rather than an individual choice, regulations require that private yards contribute to natural drainage rather than obstruct it. Because of this environmental framework, many German states changed their building codes to require that open spaces around homes must be green or biologically active. In practice, this means that new gravel-only gardens are often not permitted. In some cities, homeowners who install them are asked to remove the gravel and replace it with plants, grass, or native vegetation. Fines are possible, but usually the first step is a warning or an order to redesign the garden. Older gravel gardens are sometimes allowed to remain, especially if they were built before new rules came into effect, but new installations face much stricter control. So while gravel gardens are not banned across all of Germany by one single federal law, in many regions they are effectively not allowed anymore. Now let's look at the United States, where the situation is very different and reveals a completely opposite set of priorities. In most parts of the USA, gravel gardens are completely legal. American landscaping laws place a much stronger emphasis on private property rights. Homeowners usually have the freedom to design their yards however they want, as long as they follow basic local rules or homeowners association guidelines. The philosophical foundation is different. In America, your yard is considered your private domain, and government interference in aesthetic or environmental choices is viewed with suspicion. In fact, in many dry and desert regions of the United States, gravel landscaping is actually encouraged and financially incentivized. States like Arizona, Nevada, and parts of California promote gravel and rock gardens as a way to reduce water use. In these areas, traditional lawns require huge amounts of irrigation in climates where water is scarce and expensive. During severe droughts, municipalities offer rebates to homeowners who remove grass and replace it with gravel, native desert plants, and xeriscaping. What Germany bans for environmental reasons, America subsidizes for different environmental reasons. The contrast is striking. Environmental regulations in the United States tend to focus more on large-scale pollution, industrial emissions, wetlands protection, and endangered species habitat. Private residential yards are usually not regulated as strictly as they are in Germany, unless they violate specific local ordinances or homeowner association rules. That's why gravel gardens remain legal and common across much of the country. The regulatory burden falls on corporations and large land developers rather than individual homeowners making landscaping choices. However, even in the United States, attitudes are slowly changing as awareness grows about pollinator collapse and biodiversity loss. Some cities are beginning to promote native plants, pollinator-friendly yards, and natural landscaping instead of pure gravel. Municipal programs now encourage homeowners to remove plastic sheets, add vegetation, and create spaces that support insects and birds. Voluntary incentive programs are replacing the mandatory restrictions seen in Germany. But there is still no widespread ban on gravel gardens like the restrictions seen in parts of Germany. The approach remains educational and incentive-based rather than prohibitive. It's also important to understand that Germany is not against gravel itself. Gravel combined with living plants, open soil, and natural drainage is often allowed and even encouraged as part of sustainable landscaping. The real problem is gravel deserts with plastic sheeting underneath and no biological activity on top. Natural gravel gardens with native plants, permeable surfaces, and healthy soil can support biodiversity while still being relatively low maintenance. German regulations target the sterile, lifeless installations, not the material itself. So when people ask if gravel gardens are illegal in Germany, the honest answer is this: they are not banned everywhere by one national law, but in many regions they are restricted, discouraged, or effectively prohibited through local environmental regulations. In contrast, gravel gardens in the United States are generally legal and even promoted, especially where water conservation is a priority. This difference shows how two countries think fundamentally differently about land and responsibility. In Germany, private gardens are seen as part of the larger environmental system and are regulated accordingly. The assumption is that your landscaping choices affect your neighbors, your community, and the broader ecosystem, so collective standards apply. In the United States, personal choice and property rights play a much bigger role in landscaping decisions. The assumption is that homeowners should have maximum freedom to manage their property as they see fit, with government involvement limited to preventing direct harm or nuisance. As climate change and biodiversity loss continue accelerating, the future of gardens everywhere may move away from stone and back toward living soil. But whether that transition happens through regulation like Germany or incentives like America remains an open question. The gravel garden debate is really a debate about who decides what happens on private land and whether environmental protection justifies restricting individual choice. Subscribe to Heritage Garden Wisdom right now. Comment below telling me which approach you think works better: mandatory green space requirements or voluntary incentive programs. Share this video with someone who needs to understand that landscaping regulations vary wildly depending on whether a country prioritizes collective environmental responsibility or individual property rights. Like this if you believe understanding these different approaches helps us think more clearly about what gardens should actually do.